this. I think most folks know the drill. We interview the guests for about half an hour, during which everybody except for the three of us are muted. If you have a question, please raise your hand. And once you're called, please unmute yourself, state your name, where you're from, and your question. Thank you for joining us, and we hope this is a good show. So that's my speech. So thank you, and we'll get started pretty soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
One more minute, I would imagine,
Yeah.
and we can go.
Something like that, yeah.
Yep. It's 4:58
Yeah.
or 2 minutes to start.
It's amazing how the atomic watch caught up with itself. It's amazing how that happens. It was slow for a little while.
Wow.
Mike, can you mute?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Star 6.
Okay, we're almost ready, folks. Everybody.
I am ready if one of you guys are, and the stream is up
I think I'm
on
ready too.
YouTube.
All right,
So we are
here we
good to
go. All right, here we are. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome once again to In Perspective. My name is Bob Branco for episode 218. With me, of course, we have Peter Altschul, my good friend and colleague. What's going on today in Columbia, Missouri?
Hey, hello guys. We are experiencing some fabulous weather for Missouri. We had a miserable week, but it's 85 degrees and sunny. So we're having a great weather day, and it's only 2 weeks away from Mizzou football. So we're all getting ready for that.
We are in the 90s today, and we have been for the past 2 or 3 days. So we're having another heat wave. Hopefully that will break tomorrow or Sunday. I want to thank those people who make it possible for In Perspective to be aired. We start out with the media sources. Thank you very much. Then we have Raymond Gay, our producer, who helps us by making In Perspective a quality program behind the scenes.
Thank you, Ray.
I also want to thank Tom Dolly for posting our shows on Rosie's Place, reading board number 15. And finally, to Jacqueline Sylvia from JS Web Solutions, who archives our programs on my website. All you have to do is go to www.brancoevents.com, arrow down until you get to In Perspective Podcasts. Click on those, and you will see our archived programs from latest to earliest.
Merci, Jackie. And thank you for all of you media folks and for Tom.
In the recent past, many of us have learned more and more about non-24, which is a sleep disorder, but I'm going to stop there and have our guests explain it in a little while, even further than what I did. I thought I would ask Vicki Preddy, a nurse educator with Vanda Pharmaceuticals, to come on the show today and give us a little more information and enlighten us further about non-24, what it is, and whether or not it can be treated, and who is more receptive to it, or who's more, I can't think of the word at the moment, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. Who is more prone to getting non-24, in other words? But let me introduce Vicki. Vicki, welcome to In Perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
I think I will start out by asking the all-important question. What is non-24, Vicki?
Okay, good place to start. So non-24 is a short name for non-24-hour sleep-wake disorder. And I always like to clarify that it's the word non, N-O-N, and the number 24. Sometimes people get mixed up and are confused because of the way the word sounds and think it's the number 9, but it's non, N-O-N, and the number 24. And non-24 is a serious chronic disorder that disrupts a person's circadian rhythms, which are controlled by his or her master body clock.
Could you explain what a circadian rhythm is?
Sure, of course. So excuse me a minute. Circadian rhythms are activities that happen inside our body. They occur at a cellular level and they start around the same time every day, and then they repeat approximately every 24 hours. That's actually where what the word circadian means.
Okay. When you say approximately 24 hours, this is not an accurate circadian rhythm where it acts the same time every day?
Yeah, and that
Vicky, are you there? We are having trouble with you. You seem to have disappeared.
I think she's
Vicky-
having connection issues,
with the-
possibly.
with the circadian rhythm has gotten her.
can you
Vicky.
hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Ray, you will edit that part out. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds. Ray, you edit that part out. And then I'm going to ask the question again. Vicky, could you explain what the circadian rhythm is? Vicky,
You know what? I'm gonna have to reconnect. You
Okay.
can't hear- Can
That's
you hear
okay.
me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. If for some reason you're fading in and out.
Yeah, because I got a signal on my computer that said the internet connection was unstable.
you sound
right.
good.
There
Did
we
you
go.
want? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
you're good to go. We can.
We
Oh.
can hear.
All right.
We can
So Ray,
proceed.
you know what to do, right?
Yes, you
Okay,
can
this
ask
is
the question
official now.
again.
All right.
That's the
All right,
question.
I
So-
apologize.
It's okay.
It's not
All
your
right, here we
fault.
go.
Happen.
It's the
Here we go.
internet.
So Vicky, could you explain to us what a circadian rhythm is?
Yes. So circadian rhythms are activities that are inside our bodies and they occur at a cellular level. So they're very, very deep. They start around the same time every day and then they repeat approximately every 24 hours. And can I just add something to that, Bob?
Yes, please.
Okay, we have a lot of them. There are bunches of different activities that occur at a cellular level. Some examples are our body temperature will change due to a rhythm at the circadian level. Hunger occurs due to a circadian rhythm, and then digestion is another one that that occurs because of a circadian rhythm or is influenced by a circadian rhythm. And then, for our purposes, our sleep and wake cycle follow a circadian process or a circadian rhythm. So if you think about the definition of it, well, it's an activity that occurs at a cellular level and they start around the same time every day. That's what happens with our sleep-wake cycle. We go to sleep and wake up around the same time every day.
But if the circadian rhythm has to do with our cycles, for all intents and purposes, Vicky, we control our own hunger and our own digestion, depending on how much we like to eat. That seems to be our own voluntary choice. Now, why would that have to do with circadian rhythm, which is a cycle?
Well, the circadian rhythms will influence when you are hungry, and you don't have to eat if you don't want to, but you'll still probably feel hunger based on a circadian rhythm. And then the same with going to sleep at night. You have a rhythm that controls or manages when you fall asleep. Doesn't mean you have to go to sleep. You can try to stay awake, but you may or may not be successful with that.
So you've said the word 24-hour circadian rhythm, and
Mhm.
you identified this non-24 condition. How are the two connected?
So with circadian rhythms, we have what's called a master body clock. It controls those circadian rhythms. And the way it controls them is by staying in sync with the external clock. And it needs to stay in sync so that those circadian rhythms can run at the right times. And does that answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. So, so what are the symptoms of this condition?
So When your internal clock or your circadian rhythm, your sleep-wake cycle is not in sync with the 24-hour clock that we live by, or that most of us live by anyway, people with non-24 can start experiencing three main symptoms, and they are they have trouble falling asleep at night. They have trouble staying asleep. So we call that broken sleep, where they wake up, fall asleep a lot in the middle of the night, or they will fall asleep and then wake up and not be able to get back to sleep. So that's kind of a broken sleep cycle. And then they'll experience a lot of daytime sleepiness. Those are the three main things that occur.
And how common is this?
So with non-24, it's mostly seen in people who are totally blind. In fact, when we were conducting clinical trials with non-24, we found that it occurred in up to 70% of people who are totally blind. But it's also important to note that you don't have to be totally blind to have it. And we see it in people with low vision, and we also see it in people who are sighted. But we do not have any numbers like I gave you, that 70% occurrence in people with who are totally blind. But in the other groups of people, we don't have any large scale studies to give you any numbers.
Why are totally blind people more susceptible to getting non-24?
Great question. So with non-24, like I said, the master clock controls that circadian rhythm. Well, the master clock relies on a light source in order to control those circadian rhythms within a 24-hour time frame. If it doesn't get a light source from the external environment, like either sunlight or light from a room or a lamp, then that master clock is just going to run using its own timer. And that timer is longer than 24 hours. That's really where we get the name from. So in order for that timer to get a light source, light has to be perceived within the retina. There are special cells in the retina that perceive light and then send a signal to the master clock telling it that it's daylight. And that signals to the clock to speed up, to get rid of that extra time that it would normally want to use because it runs slow. So it tells it to get rid of it, and then that clock will run in a 24-hour day-night cycle that we're accustomed to.
Why is the timer, as you call it, longer than 24 hours?
So that's just that's the way we're built. We don't have any control over that. That's the way we were designed. And that's really kind of the bottom line with that. And we all have one that is unique. So my timer is different from your timer, and yours is different from Peter's, and Peter's is different from Eileen. So everyone has a different timer.
Is this generic?
Genetic?
Genetic?
Genetic.
Yes, it is. That's the way we were born. Yep.
So you have this internal master clock,
Right.
which can go a bit haywire, quote unquote. But if the sun is involved, if you can see the sun or impacts your eyes, it helps stabilize the circadian rhythm clock. Sort of, is that the basic way this works?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Now remember though, you have to have light perception in order for that, as you put it, for that clock to stabilize.
Right.
We just call it resetting, because those cells in the retina are light absorbing cells, and once they absorb light, they send a signal to the master clock saying, no more haywire, if you want to put it that way. Get in sync with a regular day.
So if our body needs light in order to control the situation that you're describing, how would blind people get that light?
So you won't be able to, if you can't absorb light, then you don't have light perception. And then there is no other way to get that light. I mean, there's no other way to perceive that light if you don't have light perception in those light perceiving cells.
So if I'm out in the sun all day long and I'm totally
Mhm.
blind and I bounce around and go swimming and put on sunscreen, I'm in the sun all day, that's
Mhm.
not going to solve the problem because I have no light perception. So it doesn't matter if
Exactly.
you're sitting, if what you're doing. This is one thing that you can't control if even if you're in the sun a lot, right? It's a whole your eyes, because your eyes aren't working properly to make this
Yes,
work.
you're absolutely right. I
Okay.
get that question a lot,
Yep.
what if I sit out in the sun all day? So it all comes down to the light perception in those cells in the retina.
So you mentioned you mentioned the three main symptoms of non-24:
Mhm.
trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, and excessive daytime sleepiness. Can you talk a little more about those three things? What is that? How does that play itself out?
Sure. So so just in terms of the difficulty falling asleep at night, um, what happens with non-24 is your sleep time and your wake time will drift forward. So every day, if your clock isn't getting reset, the time you go to bed at night is just going to keep moving forward. So if you normally want to go to sleep at 11, maybe you'll lay down at 10:30, and this is just an example. You'll lay down at 10:30, and under normal circumstances, you might be asleep by 11. With non-24, the way that plays out is you might lay there for a long time. The one night it could be maybe you can't fall asleep until 11:10. The next night it's going to be 11:20. Then the next night it could be 11:30. So it keeps moving forward like that. And then um, with the broken sleep or the inability to stay asleep, same thing, really. You might actually be able to fall asleep, but then you wake up shortly thereafter, and then you either can't get back to sleep at all, or you just are up and down all night. And then with the daytime sleepiness, um, a lot of times what happens with that is people haven't slept all night. And so by the time morning comes around, they're exhausted, and their sleep wake pattern is such that it's kept them up all night, and now it's time for them to go to bed because their cycle is telling them that it's time to sleep, even though it's morning.
So no matter how we program our body to do the routine things, this cycle will still get out of hand no matter what.
The cycle is still there. Yep. And if there's not a reset with an external source of light, like I said, either light, lamp or a sunlight, without that external light and that light perception and that signal to the master clock, that master clock's going to run using its own timer, which is natural. It's not anything wrong with it. It's just that's the way it runs. It's just not exactly the way we want it. And it's not going to reset.
So we've talked about the general sense about the symptoms, and I thank you for that description. And
Mhm.
so, what are the effects of non-24? If you're having trouble sleeping, what happens?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that because it's more than just those three symptoms,
Right.
in terms of what people feel like. Um, you can imagine what it's like, or you probably have even experienced it. Most of us have, where we've had terrible night's sleep. And the next morning we feel kind of groggy, maybe grumpy. Some people feel kind of out of sorts. But imagine with non-24, if you're having night after night where you cannot fall asleep at a good time, or you cannot sleep at all, you're going to have trouble focusing. You may have trouble with your relationships because people don't understand what it's like not to be able to fall asleep, and to feel low energy, disconnected, disoriented, dizzy. There may be just severe sleep deprivation. So that's kind of the effect that it has on people. It's hard to make decisions sometimes, hard to solve problems. So
It's hard to stay awake during meetings if you go to work.
exactly.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and if you're a student, I've heard people say I was up all night studying because that's all I could do. I couldn't fall asleep. But then I have a 9 o'clock class. So how am I supposed to stay up all night and study and then go to class?
So yeah, no, yeah. So I think I might have this problem. You know, I have weird sleep patterns that never seem to remain the same.
Uh-huh.
How is non-24 diagnosed? What do I do to know if I actually have this condition or if it's something else?
Yeah, great question. We always say the first thing to do is to talk to your healthcare provider, explain what your symptoms are, explain what you're experiencing. They sometimes they will order different tests to rule other disorders out. For instance, sleep apnea is a common disorder that causes similar symptoms. You know, people have trouble falling asleep. They can't stay asleep, and then they're sleepy the whole next day. So some doctors will order a sleep study to rule out sleep apnea. There's no blood test for it. There's no, there's no other sleep study to find non-24. But the best thing you can do too for yourself is to keep a sleep diary, to look for patterns and identify the way you feel, like we talked about that disconnectedness and the staying up all night. So keeping a good record of how you're feeling and what you're experiencing is something that is tangible that you can put in front of your physician. So definitely talk to your doctor, let them know how you feel, show them the data that you've collected on yourself, and see how they want to proceed.
What's involved? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
What's involved in a sleep study?
I'm not sure about that actually, Bob. I've never, but I know sometimes they'll keep you overnight, but that's really not my area of expertise. So they all do it differently. Some people do it, they'll put a machine to give you a machine to take home, and they do it that way. Some will keep you overnight. So it just depends on how the doctor wants to proceed.
I actually had that experience, and they kept you overnight and put these sensors all over your body, and I couldn't get to sleep, which sort of defeated the purpose of the study.
Yeah,
but anyway, that's another conversation for another time. So you work, you're a nurse educator from Vanda Pharmaceuticals, is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So talk about two questions, and sort of what is a nurse educator, and talk a little about what Vanda Pharmaceuticals does.
Okay. So a nurse educator is a registered nurse in our company. It's a registered nurse that in our case educates, mostly ours is consumer driven. For the nurses, we educate people on the disorder of non-24. So we explain what it is, we explain why it happens, and then we connect people with our health educators at Vanda to help them get a little bit more information about non-24, and then learn about treatments if they're interested in that.
And talk about Vanda a little bit. You're a pharmaceutical company. How long have you been in business? What kinds of other drugs do you manufacture? Talk about, the history of Vanda.
Sure. So I can talk about non-24 basically, but
yeah, go ahead. Whatever you're comfortable talking about.
Okay. Yeah. So Vanda is a biopharmaceutical company, and what they do is specialize in finding medications or treatments for people who are struggling from rare diseases or unmet medical needs. The company was founded by a psychiatrist, and he's still with the company today. And it is a publicly traded company, but he still runs it for us. They're located in Washington, D.C., and I believe it was 2007. I'd have to look that up, where the company was founded. But by comparison, it's a relatively small biopharmaceutical company. you may have heard of some of those. There are some
Yeah.
located up in the Boston area, but we're in Washington, D.C.
So how did non-24 come across your radar?
Ah, interestingly. Um, well, with any career, you kind of make your way through it and discover areas of interest within. And some nurses like the fast pace of the ER, some like the intensity of the ICU. And I discovered through my career, and I've been doing it a long time, that I really love education. So I like teaching people about what's going on, about with their disorder or their disease, and then offering help or different solutions. And for that reason, I pursued an advanced degree in nursing education. And then I got a call one day from Vanda, saying that they are looking for a nurse with an education background who is interested in working with, in teaching people about non-24. And I did not know anything about it. And like I said, I didn't even know whether it was 924 or non-24. So I was intrigued for a couple of reasons. In this role, I'm solely focused on education around a disorder. I don't promote treatments, which I like because I think treatments should be discussed between physicians and or between the physician and the patient. So my role is strictly educational. And then I've just never worked with the blind or visually impaired, so I was excited about the challenge to learn about you guys and what you go through and what I could do to help.
So thank you for that. I never heard of such a thing as a nurse educator degree, master's degree. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's primarily for teaching nurses about nursing. So it's something that you normally take into the college setting, but it translates very well into this because you use some of the same theories and the same techniques.
So Vicky,
Yeah.
although you don't promote treatments specifically, I'm sure that our listeners would want to know, in case they are diagnosed with non-24, what would they look forward to as far as correcting the problem is concerned? I'm sure they'd be curious to know what you thought about that.
Sure. That's a good question. If what I would suggest that if someone is struggling with sleep and wake disorders, some of the things that we talked about, to contact me directly, and I can connect them with a health educator at Vanda because they are the experts at treatment. Vanda does have a product that would treat non-24, but there are things that those health educators would want to discuss with that person to review, review what's going on, just kind of take a deeper dive into that person's personal situation. And then they, together with that person and the health educator, they can decide if that's something they want to take to their doctor, and be armed with all the best information and the best approach. So that's what I would do, is just suggest that you give me a call, or I can call you, whatever you want me to do, and I can provide you my phone number.
We will actually, yeah. Why don't you do that now? What is your phone number?
Okay, my number is area code 202-578-9060.
So let's repeat that, please.
Area code 202-578-9060.
So talk a little about, so I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm having trouble, I may have the condition or not. And we'll talk about the drug that non-24 has together to help solve the problem. But what are other really good sleep hygiene strategies that might make things a little better, just in general terms?
Yeah, good question, Peter. I think most of us probably know what the things that we need to do to get a good night's sleep. But, always consider what you're eating before you go to bed, when you're eating, what the room temperature is like, what the light situation is like. Trying to establish a regular routine is something that would probably help. So those are the kinds of things that we would always recommend, and that's what a health educator too would talk to someone about. They would say, let's take a look at what your habits are. Let's take a look at what you've tried. Let's make sure everything else is in order before we move on. And
Well, I'd like to make an observation, a personal observation. I'm glad you brought this up, because for a while in the evening when I listened to the radio, once in a while I would just fall asleep in my recliner,
Mhm.
wake up at about 1 or 2 a.m., go to bed, wake up at 5 or 6 a.m. All of a sudden, I happened to have a week where I was extremely busy. I had a lot of appointments, a lot of errands, a lot of things that I had to do every day. I was out of the house. I was active, more active than normal. My sleep got much better for several days after that. I did not fall asleep in the recliner. I went to bed at a certain time, was out like a light for several hours. So I think being extremely busy and active during the day would contribute to more normal sleep, wouldn't it?
That could, absolutely. It seems like it did for you.
Yeah. So it's a certain kind of activity, right? I mean, I would imagine if you do a little bit of exercise, presumably not at night, might help.
Mm-hmm.
Help stabilize things a little bit.
Sure, keeping busy and keeping a routine.
Yeah. Talk about, I'm sure you've gotten this question before. Talk about the whole complexity of eye gadgets, the iPhones and that kind of stuff. How does that impact sleep?
Well, I think what we've always heard in the field is that I don't know if it's the gadgets themselves, but the lighting, that can influence your sleep pattern. They've told us don't go on your computer right before you go to bed, or stay off the computer, because that can really get in the way of a good night's sleep. And those little lights I've heard on the television can really bother people.
But what if you're blind?
So I don't know if that, but I mean, if you have any light perception at all, that it may still impact you. But just being on a computer, and I've always heard you kind of need to shut your brain down, before you go to bed. Yeah.
All right. No, that and all those things. I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about. So talk about. We brushed this question up a second, but I'd like you to say a little more about it if you can. How is non-24 the same or different from other sleep conditions, insomnia or sleep apnea?
Okay, good question. So non-24 is a disorder in the circadian rhythm. It causes problems for your sleep-wake pattern. That's the root of the problem. Insomnia is a symptom of non-24, but it's also a diagnosis in and of itself. Like I said, non-24 occurs because there's a misalignment between your internal circadian rhythm and the external day. But insomnia is the difficulty, when people have difficulties falling asleep, and the root of that problem is traditionally or typically due to it's not due to circadian rhythm disorder. It's due to normally anxiety. Sometimes depression can cause insomnia. Different medications that people take can cause insomnia. So the difference there is the root of the problem. And then with sleep apnea, the problem there is, again, the reason people experience sleep apnea is, or what it is they have, their breathing stops while they're sleeping, and then it causes kind of gasping. So the reason they're struggling is usually because they are not getting oxygen to the brain.
Okay, I would like to open up our program to our participants. So Ray, if you would look for raised hands and let us know.
Sure.
Ready to
Ray,
talk
if
to
you could-
Vicky?
if you could do the
Yep.
raise your hand little speech, that'd be awesome.
Sure. On the PC, it's Alt Y, and on the Mac, it's Option Y. Under the More tab or More option for smartphones, and on the telephones, it's *9. And then for muting, it's option that Alt Y on or Alt A on PC, Command Option A, I believe, on Mac. Lower left on the smartphones, and *6 on telephones. And I will go through and get questions ready to roll.
Let's see. Okay. So while we're waiting to see if there are any questions, Vicky, can you address the besides non-24, are there other circadian rhythm disorders?
Sure. Yeah, there are. So you probably know people that work night shift, or know of that anyway.
Oh yeah.
That's a circadian disorder. We call that shift work disorder. And again, same thing. There's a mismatch between the circadian system and the external environment. But the cause of non-24 versus shift work disorder is different. People, again, the cause of non-24, we've already talked about that, is because of the lack of light perception. But with a shift work disorder, people are working at night, and they're staying awake, and they're receiving that light into their eyes. So their circadian system thinks that it's daylight.
And that's okay if they're regularly on the night shift. I mean, they may cause other problems, but often what happens is that people, are switched from shift to shift depending on their work schedules, and that's where the problem takes place. Correct?
It's caused by the shift work disorder is caused by that individual's choice to work at night. It's a behavioral issue. So once they switch, they may go back to a normal schedule. If that happens, then their circadian rhythm is going to reset, because presumably they still have light perception. So
yeah.
All right.
Right.
Yes, we have Eileen, your first question for the program today. And just to remind everyone, you can raise your hands and I'll get everyone queued up in an order.
Thank you, Eileen. Welcome.
You have a question for Vicky Preddy?
I do. I was part of the original clinical trials. So I definitely know that I have non-24 sleep-wake disorder. Interestingly enough, my clock is off by 20 minutes. So my cycle is 24 hours, 20 minutes. So sometimes it's not bad, but as we add 20 minutes every day, there's a period of time when when nights are tough, and I am all the time. I have broken sleep. Mm-hmm. So right now, actually, I'm in a good part of the cycle, so I should be pretty coherent. My question, and Vicki, I met you through the Connecticut Council of the Blind when you spoke to us.
I remember your story.
Okay. Yeah. So my question now, and I never chose to go with the Vanda product. For one reason, I wasn't sure that it was helping me that much. And secondly, I was concerned about the cost if I had to pay for the meds. But anyway, my question again is, do we know of other side effects of non-24? I've got this, I know about the sleep. Oh, and I do want to say, when you were asked about what to keep in mind, and one thing they really, really, really stressed during the clinical trial was go to bed or try to go to bed at the same time every night. That they talked about that more than anything else. So that's what I do try to do. But anyway, do we know about other side effects of non-24? And also, where do I go? I know I have it. I know what I'm experiencing. In my case, it's constant dizziness. And I don't know where to go from here.
So we always encourage people to speak to their physician.
Oh yeah, I've done that.
Okay. And if non-24 is a rare disorder and it's not well known amongst physicians, because any physician can work with somebody who has sleep disorders or a sleep-wake disorder. It could be a primary, it could be an ophthalmologist, it could be a neurologist. It's all over the place. So it's always best to start with your physician, but because it's so rare and not very well known, Vanda can have a health educator reach out to your physician and educate him or his colleagues about non-24 so that they can understand why it occurs and why it's so common in people with low vision or people who are totally blind. So my recommendation or where to go would be first to your physician. And if you're not working with our support center, I'd love to get you reconnected with them, Eileen, because that's really the best place to start. And we don't charge anything for that. So it's a really nice opportunity to have someone advocate on your behalf at no charge and really get to the bottom of what's going on. And you're already ahead of the game because you've already been through the clinical trials.
So I would contact you and then we could go from there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
You could connect. Okay.
Yeah,
and again, I
absolutely.
apologize to the group for, bringing up my personal story, but
No apology necessary. That's how we learn things.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, you that's excellent, because that's what I want people to know is if you're struggling and you want help, we're here to help. And it's easier if I connect you than and get things started for you. So we can do that at another time.
All right. Well, I thank you, and I thank the group very much.
Well,
You're
thank you for joining us, Eileen.
Thank you, Eileen.
Ray, are there other
Sure.
questions?
Nope.
Okay. So, Vicky,
Yes.
let us. You talked about the supports that you offer people when they call you and they connect you with I forgot what you called it. The folks who could help them think through this issue. What might you expect if they work with your team?
Yeah. Yep. Good question. So we have we call them health educators, and sometimes we call them case managers. But what you can expect is someone who is going to work with you one-on-one, so you can share your story. You can share your history, and then you can expect to get some advice, some facts, and more facts about the disorder itself. You can get information about treatment. You can have us contact your physician on your behalf so that we can make sure that everyone has a full understanding of what's going on with non-24 and why it's happening. If there's an interest in treatment, they will do a benefits investigation so that we can find out if there is any reimbursement for treatment, and then go from there.
So, you spoke a little bit earlier about how you got interested in non-24. Do you know how Vanda got interested in non-24? What prompted them to do the research that they did that ultimately result in the medication they offer?
Yeah. No, I've never read a story about that, but
Okay.
but I'm guessing that because the CEO of Vanda is a psychiatrist, they also treat non-24. So my guess is that he was seeing things like that happening in his practice, and that's what triggered his interest
Okay.
in researching.
Okay.
All right. Phone number ending in 638. You are up next.
638.
Hello, 638. You are next. Do you have a question for Vicky Preddy?
638. I don't hear anything that resembles a human.
Okay, there you.
There he
There
is.
you are. It's Beth.
There she
It's
is.
This
Beth,
phone
yes.
sometimes
Hi,
takes
Beth.
a while to unmute.
Hi,
Yeah,
Beth.
this is
I
Beth
know.
from New Mexico. What was that? What was your number again? 202-578 what?
9060.
Oh, okay, 90. Yeah.
9060.
I have broken sleep. Like I don't like to go to bed too early because it's weird. If I go to bed like at 9 o'clock at night, I'll wake up like at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4. But then sometimes I'll go to bed like at, say, 11 o'clock at night, and I'll wake up like at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then I try and roll over and go back to sleep, and I'll wake up at 4:30 or 3:30 or, and then again at 5:30. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
any thoughts?
And I don't know what to do with it anymore.
Yeah.
I've tried taking that sleepy time too.
Well, I sometimes I sound like a broken record, but I really believe your best source of information and help lies with Vanda's support center, so that you can really review what's going on and get some suggestions from them. And we also have a nice audio book that we can send you, and that's a good source of information. But they're the experts at really taking a deep dive into your personal situation, and then helping you connect with your physician on that level.
What is that audio book?
It's called Non-24. It's just a short, all you do is open it up. It's not something that you have to plug in or insert into a cassette. It's just it's like one of those cards that you buy at the,
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
So if you call me, we'll get your name and phone number, and I'll send it. I'll have our case manager send that to you.
Oh,
Great.
okay. Now,
Okay.
Now, I had heard that the medicine had bad side effects, or gave you nightmares, or
I heard that also.
different things,
Well,
suicidal ideation and different things.
yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, all medicine has side effects, so you definitely want to review those with the case manager, or more importantly, probably with your physician. And not everyone experiences the side effects. So it's just like any other medicine. It's different for everyone. But you would want to. It's good that you're thinking of that, because you know some people don't ask those questions, and it's really important to know what you're getting into.
Can you explain?
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, Beth. Thank you. I appreciate. And I wish
Yeah,
you
well, thank you.
I wish you well. I have the same kind of sleep problems myself once in a while, so I get it.
Mhm.
Vicky, can you talk a little bit about what the meds do to help address this circadian rhythm problem? How does the meds that you how does it work? How does it restore the clock?
Right. So Peter, unfortunately, I can't talk about medicine because I'm strictly educating about the disorder, and I've never been, I guess if you could say, certified to talk about medicine. And Vanda does that for a reason. They like to keep my role as educational, and they let the health educators educate and promote medication or the use of it. And more importantly, too, the account managers are in the field to promote that. They go through extensive training on it. So I would tell you something that is wrong.
Okay. All right.
So I apologize.
That's
but
okay. I appreciate the honesty.
Sure.
So I'm curious. There are places like right now, Alaska is the light. Well, really back in June, you essentially in Alaska, in places like that, the sun was out for what, 20 hours a day, 18 hours a day, whatever it is. And then, in the winter, it's 4 or 5 hours a day. How does that impact the whole sleep circadian rhythm?
Sure. Yeah. Very good question. So again, if it's dark all the time, that master clock's not going to know when it's light out and that it's time to reset. Like in was Eileen, she said, she had 20 extra minutes on her timer. So if you don't get a light source to notify that clock that it's daylight, then that extra 20 minutes is not going to get erased. And so your sleep schedule just keeps drifting and shifting. So
wouldn't that affect sighted people in Alaska, because light is not readily available to them as well?
Yes. So what they need to do, is they have to have a source of light, like artificial. So they may, if I were advising them, I would say, get a lamp and make sure that it turns on. It's like an alarm clock, essentially. But they have to have a source of light to let them know when it's 8 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock in the morning. So if they don't, then they're not, their timer is not going to know that it's daylight. So they really have to pay attention to getting a light source at the time that they want it. If it stays light all the time, then we would recommend putting on blackout curtains to shut out that light, because your master clock needs to shut off too.
Yeah.
Ray, any more raised hands right now?
No. However, could we go over a website if people want to learn more, as well as just reviewing your contact information one more time?
Oh, sure. I'll put it in the chat. Is anybody looking? Is anyone using the chat?
Probably not. So
okay.
You're better just doing it slowly.
Yeah, sure. It's non dash 24.com.
So www.non-24.com.
Yep.
All right. Yeah.
Nikki, I'm going to go off a little on a tangent, hopefully not that much, but on the same subject, obviously.
Okay.
You mentioned at the beginning of the program that blind people are the most affected by non-24.
Mhm.
At the same time, blind people have difficulty finding jobs. Now, once they are finally employed, they don't need to have this added problem of having a sleep disorder while on the job. I mean, they're lucky enough to go to work to begin with.
Yep. I agree with you. And I don't know the number of people who are working that struggle with non-24, but it's been kind of my mission this year to focus on that, because isn't it interesting that the number is the same? 70% of people who are blind are unemployed. It's around that, right? 67 to 70% are unemployed. And then 70% or up to 70% of people who are blind can have non-24. I'm not saying there's any relationship there, but I just find that number kind of interesting. But if you're working and you're struggling with this, call us so we can help. We can look into that. That's when you want to reach out to our support center, because I'm guessing that most people want to keep their jobs.
Yeah, a better statistic, I think, just for the information of our audience, is that the unemployment rate among disabled folks is somewhere between 2 to 3 times higher than the non-disabled population. That 70% figure is sort of weird, an artifact of weird polling, but I don't want to get into that. That's a different conversation.
Okay.
But speaking from my my experience, I worked fairly regularly, and it did help keep the condition at bay if I have it at all. But I think I might. In any case, because you're on a routine, you're sort of on call, whatever it is you're doing, so it's much easier to focus and stay awake. It's not perfect, but it is easier. But I've also had moments when, as I made this sort of snarky comment earlier in the show, staying awake during meetings. Well, meetings can be pretty boring anyway, at least in my experience. And sometimes it was hard for me to stay awake during meetings. And
Yeah.
I wonder if that might be a symptom of the disorder or not. But it really, if you're on a fixed schedule, it really does make a difference. That's one of the things you suggested about, dealing with sleep issues. Stick to a schedule, and that's much easier to do if you have to be at the office from 8 to 5 or pick your hour than if you have more control of your time. Ironically enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have commitments and
Yeah. Can you talk going back to this whole Alaska thing about the shades versus the sun lamp or heat lamp or whatever term you want to use? How is that connected with seasonal affective disorder?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
And what about daylight savings time or when you set the clocks? How does that impact non-24?
Yeah, it really doesn't impact non-24. I mean, we all kind of struggle a little bit with that, when we switch times, but the sleep-wake rhythm is just going to keep running. So you just, we all need to adjust to that 1 hour, time difference or whatever it is that, they throw at us, but it's not going to impact non-24. Non-24 is there because of the circadian rhythm disorder.
Right. And of course, the same thing applies to travel, right? If you're traveling to Japan or someplace, the Olympics just finished in Tokyo, and and you're dealing with a different time there, that must mess up everybody's circadian rhythm a little bit, right? Because you're
Jet lag.
Jet lag, right?
Yeah, and again, it's just a matter of adjusting. We all have to quote get used to that. But it's not a it's not a permanent situation. Non-24 is permanent and chronic.
We have about 3 more minutes. Vicki, I want to get to a very important question. Who was it, if you even know, that discovered non-24?
Oh, I don't have a name of a person. I know that just throughout time, well, it was back in the 40s, the 1940s, where researchers and scientists discovered that, sleep disturbances may be related to circadian rhythms, but I don't have a name of a person.
Okay.
But
Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, so you think that, what was I going to ask you? This whole circadian rhythm thing started in the 40s, you think?
Well, the existence of circadian rhythms across all species has been known for a long time, about 1,000 years. But it was in the 40s that they were able to, they started documenting that circadian rhythms in humans were running longer than 24 hours. And that included that sleep-wake cycle. So it was that's kind of the timeline. So we've known about circadian rhythms and that there were all these internal activities for a long time, but we just started kind of narrowing it down in the 40s
with that in mind, I've only heard of the term non-24 probably the past 10 years or so.
Yeah, it's still very it's still not that well known. I mean, today I was at a program in Orlando, and most people had seen the commercial that we have out there that describes non-24, but no one knew any of the details.
Really quick, we have Jane who has her hand raised with a question. I know we don't have much time left.
Jane, you have 1 minute, so go for it. Hello, Jane. You are on In Perspective with Vicki Preddy.
Jane, maybe?
Hello, Jane.
So, Vicky, if Jane comes on, we can interrupt your thing. But can you give one last sort of summary of the main message you want to convey today?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for giving me the chance to do that. Just remember that the root of the problem with non-24, NON, and the number 24, the root of the problem lies in the circadian system. And it's due to a lack of light perception. And without light perception, all of our circadian rhythms are really out of sync. And for our purposes, it's the sleep-wake cycle. And there is help, and you can get help from Vanda. You can get help by contacting me first. And
your phone number, because we are out of time. So your phone number one more time.
202-578-9060.
Well, Vicky, thank you very much for appearing here on In Perspective. And I'm hoping that our listeners who suffer similar symptoms will go to their providers and try to figure out what's wrong, get a diagnosis. And if it is non-24, they will determine treatment, because obviously you don't promote that. That's fine. Let the providers work with the patients on that. Hopefully they'll be able to figure out some things. And I want to thank our listeners as well. Next week, we have another author coming on the show, Barbara Spencer. And she's written a couple of books, so please stay tuned. Peter and I have the books. We're going to read them and speak to Barbara. Peter, thank you very much again.
Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Vicky, for joining us. And we'll see you all next week.
Safe with God's abundant blessings. Take care now.
All right. Good night.